Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the November 18th, 2009 meeting of the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission for the City of Thousand Oaks. And if you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Ms. Bravo, would you please call the roll?
Chair Price?
Here.
Vice Chair Gregory?
Here.
Commissioner Lemo?
Present.
Commissioner McKay?
Present.
Commissioner McMahon?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any person who wishes to speak regarding an item on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction during the public comments portion of the agenda must file a public speaker card with the recording secretary before that portion of the agenda is called. Any person who wishes to speak on a specific agenda item must file a public speaker card before the specific item is called. Persons addressing the Traffic Commission are requested to state their name and city of residence for the record. Under state law, issues presented or introduced under public comments can have no action and will be referred to the Traffic Engineering Division Manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda. And if you would, please turn off your pagers and cell phones, put them on vibrate or off. And as a reminder, there's not to be any dialogue between the audience and commissioners at any time. TOTV can only record your comments when speaking into the microphone, and a wireless microphone is available for your convenience should you need to step away from the podium while speaking. So we will open up the public comments portion of the meeting here. And, each speaker will be given 3 minutes. The recording secretary will set the timer accordingly. Unfortunately, I don't know, is the light working, Ms. Bravo?
They are working now, thank you.
Bravo. So when the yellow light is displayed, you will have 1 minute left. So please begin wrapping up at that time. And once the red light comes on, that indicates that your 3 minutes are up. So please stop speaking, but remain at the podium until questions, if any, from the commissioners have been answered. Okay, we do have one public speaker card, and it's Mr. J.C. Simmons. And again, please state, I know that you know, your name and city of residence.
Commissioner Price, Commissioners. J.C. Simmons, 20-year resident of Newberry Park, about a 30-year resident of Thousand Oaks. I am currently president of the Conejo Valley Cycle Club. I'm here to remind the city that Thousand Oaks was awarded Bicycle Friendly in January on the bronze level by the League of American Bicyclists, and the Conejo Valley Cyclist was also recognized as Bicycle Club of the Year for the Western United States. As part of that, my club is donating 50 bikes to the Boys and Girls Club this Monday at 4 o'clock at the Newberry Park High School. This is the 4th annual we've done this. We did through the school district for a few years, and now we've done it through the Boys and Girls Club. We're essentially seeding the next generation of cyclists, and who can't remember that first bicycle they got. Okay. And along with that, I'd like to point out to the Commission and the City that May is America Bicycle Month. And as part of that, cruising again will be on May 8th, Saturday. My club puts on a large ride in town called Cruising the Conejo. We'll probably have 1,500, 2,000 riders here that day. Also, the Tour of California is going to finalize in Thousand Oaks on May 23rd. The tour is a week-long event starting on May 16th. And I'd also like to remind the Commission that the Ride of Silence is an international event, falls on the 3rd Wednesday of the month in May, and your meeting is normally on that night. And I know several of the commissioners like to participate in that event. So I'm giving you 6 months warning. You can move it to the second week or start a half hour late or something. Anyways, those are my comments. Any questions? Yes, Dave.
It's actually not a question, it's a comment. I was there to see the donation of the Boys and Girls Club bikes a couple of years ago or a year ago, and these are fabulous bikes. And I think the thing that was so great for the kids is that they are such nice bikes. They're not anything that these kids would normally get. Their kids are selected, by a process to get the bikes that don't have them. And the kids were just ecstatic, but the parents were just amazed that they were getting bikes of such quality, the care that you guys put into fitting the bike safely to the kids, and the whole process was just so well done. So, congratulations for continuing that.
Thank you, Commissioner McKay. I'd also like to point out that we also give away not only the brand new bikes through Giant, gives them a really great price, but we also supply every child with a properly fitted helmet. Any other comments, questions?
No, I would certainly echo her comments. I think it's great you're seeding the next bike riders there. That's great. And I know that I, for one, will see you at the Ride of Silence. I may have to break off and not finish, but as I've done in years past. So looking forward to it. Okay. These uncomfortable pauses are necessary in order to take care of some housekeeping needs to be done. So anyway, we are on to the summary notes from the October 21st meeting. Any comments from commissioners? Commissioner Gregory.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. We did wind up making a motion on item 6. I believe it was item 6. Was that not necessary? I don't see it posted here. And I think the recommendation was to adopt your 8 top priorities or recommendations in there.
I'll have to check on that and get back with you at the next meeting.
Okay.
Thanks.
Commissioner Lemo.
I don't usually remember well, but I do remember that, so I just wanted to go on the record. I do remember we did discuss adopting the 8 top priorities, so hopefully we can, if we didn't get it right last time, maybe we can revisit that. Can we adjust the record accordingly, or is that proper?
Yes, I think that we'll have that for our next meeting and include that in that would be the January meeting, since we've voted not to have a meeting in December. Any other comments, commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move right along to the engineer's report, and Mr. Machiko.
Thank you, Chair Price. This item is a petition request for the installation of speed humps on Syria Street between Avenida de los Arboles and Keats Avenue. Tonight we're asking the Traffic Commission to consider the staff report, receive public input, decide on an improvement program as appropriate. At this time, staff does not recommend speed humps be installed on Syria Street since the road conditions do not meet the city's speed hump guidelines. Right here we have on our PowerPoint a location map that shows the street that we're going to be looking at tonight. It's a 6/10 mile residential street. And what we've done here on this graphic is show if speed humps were installed along Sirius, we would need roughly 10 speed humps placed about 300 feet apart in order to ensure that we have constant uniform speed throughout the entire distance from Arboles to Keats. The street has 64 homes fronting. Arboles is to the north, Keats is to the west. And you'll notice that there's a number of bends or curves in the road. There's a little S-curve at the midpoint, and just south of Atlas, the road bends sort of into an L configuration. I'll show a series of pictures. This first picture is looking southbound as you enter Sirius, upon exiting Arbalest, first thing you encounter is a speed limit sign, and then you'll see further ahead are a number of warning signs of the various road conditions. The warning sign that you'll come up across first is a road narrow sign, and then further south of that there's a set of yellow signs marking a marked crosswalk at Atlas Avenue. You'll notice in this segment there's sidewalks, a 6-foot wide landscape parkway area, and street lighting on the west side of the street. As you drive further south on Sirius, you come across an area south of Atlas where the road is unimproved. There's about a 700-foot long segment where the road is like this. It's about 28 feet of pavement width. There's skip striping along the center line, and there's also warning signs in place. Further south, you'll see that there's a curve warning sign, a reverse curve warning sign on the right-hand side. Here's a view of Sirius as you travel eastbound after exiting Keats Avenue. Again, first thing you come across is a speed limit sign. You notice that here again we have street lights. They're on the south side of the street, the landscape parkway, and a 4-foot wide sidewalk. This next slide shows further east. This is just before you head into an S-curve, and that S-curve is marked with a warning sign. And this last slide, again further east, just as you exit the S-curve, there's a road narrow signs prior to entering that unimproved road segment. Now, to give some background as to why you're here tonight, I would like to bring up the fact that this segment of Sirius was previously considered for speed humps in January of '97. We received a petition back then, and the Traffic Commission did not recommend speed humps since the road conditions did not fulfill the speed hump guidelines 12 years ago. For this investigation, we received a petition on May 6, 2009. 39 homes signed the petition from the 64 homes fronting the street. That's a 61% signature rate. Our city requires a 60% signature rate for staff to conduct an investigation and have a hearing at the Traffic Commission. The primary concerns are speeding and school zone traffic when University Elementary School was open. You may know that that school has closed when this 2009-2010 school year began. And for tonight's meeting, we notified about 117 property owners to provide input. I believe Exhibit A in the report shows you the area that we notified. For this investigation, we are using the original speed hump guidelines adopted in 1983. The Traffic Commission is probably aware that there was a new policy adopted in May 19th of this year, but since the petition came in 13 days before the new policy was adopted, we're reviewing this matter based on the original guidelines. And the 4 key components that we mainly look at when we receive a petition, number 1 is the volume guideline, the 2,500 vehicles per day that must travel that roadway. Number 2 is the speed component. 87% of vehicles exceed a speed of 25 miles an hour. Number 3 is that the road must be a residential street per the vehicle code. And number 4, 60% of the residents fronting the street must sign the petition. And for this petition, we did receive 61%. We took measurements at 2 points along the street. One area was north of Atlas. In that area, which would be considered that school zone of University School, and there was an area south of Atlas near 2508 Sirius Street. The measured volume in the northerly section near the university school zone was 580 vehicles per day, and that's well below the 2,500 vehicles required for or to meet the speed hump guidelines. We did take a measurement of traffic on that same segment last June before university closed, and the volume was 740 vehicles per day. So it was there's been a drop of 160 vehicles per day since the school has been closed. 76% exceed a speed of 25 miles an hour in that segment. The area that's outside the school zone to the south, the current volume is 630 vehicles per day, and before the school had closed, the volume was 50 vehicles higher at 680 vehicles per day. The percent of traffic over 25 miles an hour was 74%. We also took a look at collisions that were reported along this road segment over a 4.5-year period from January 2005 to August 2009. There were 4 reported collisions, and of those 4, one we could safely say that could have been prevented with speed humps. It was a rear-end collision, and a vehicle that rear-ended the lead vehicle was speeding. Over the past 12 months, there have been no incidents reported to the police department. And to summarize our findings, again, our investigation was based on the original 1983 speed hump guidelines. All the criteria or warrants were not fully met. Just the petition requirement was met. The speed requirement of 87% exceeding 25 miles per hour was not met, and the daily traffic volume of 2,500 vehicles was not met either. I would like to point out that if the commission would like to make a recommendation for speed humps on Sirius Street, you can do so. You would need to cite extenuating circumstances that to deviate from the speed hump guidelines. The most recent case was Upper Ranch Road, which was approved about a year and a half ago for speed humps, and those extenuating circumstances, examples would be no street lights, school zone, equestrian zone, shortcut traffic, and things like that. But as far as the recommendation at this time by staff is to request additional speed enforcement during the morning and afternoon commute periods, as well as deploying the radar speed trailer. Would like to point out that if this investigation was based on the newly adopted speed hump guidelines, this street would fail to meet those requirements as well. And I've given each of the commissioners a copy of the newly adopted guidelines in case you're curious as to what was finalized. That completes this report, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Gregory.
Yeah, in that section with no sidewalks, that's very curvy. It's very narrow there. How wide is the street right there? Did you say it was 28 feet?
It's roughly 28 feet.
Okay. Did you, because I was looking at some of the traffic volume things that we looked at for at least reducing it to 1,500 trips, and there are quite a few that are met. Like no sidewalks, many hidden driveways, shortcut exceeds 35% of total vehicle volume. Don't know about that, but we didn't really do a shortcut study there, correct?
No, we did not.
Okay. The street is narrow. There are windy blind curves along the street. Anyway, some of that gives me concern, but I want to hear also what public comment is about. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Lemo.
I certainly don't want to put you on the spot. I was wondering if we have any idea since 2005 or even in the last 12 months the number of speeding violations that took place there? Thank you.
I don't know that off the top of my head, Commissioner. I can tell you since I've been here in June, I don't recall any specific requests for speed enforcement on that section of roadway. So I would have to research it for you, but I could have it for you at the next meeting if you'd like.
Thank you. I don't know if that's really necessary. I was just wondering if you if you recalled any, or it doesn't seem like that's a major issue. I just wanted to vet that last question. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay. Anyone wishing to address the Commission on this agenda item may do so by filling out a purple speaker card or a blue written statement card. Okay, we do have a number of speakers here this evening. We do have one main speaker who will be given 10 minutes, with each subsequent speaker given 5 minutes. Again, I'll remind you that when the yellow light comes on, that means you have a minute left, and please begin wrapping up. And when the red light comes on, we'd appreciate it if you would stop your remarks. Also, again, I would remind you that to state your name and city of residence prior to speaking. So our main speaker, in addition, will have 5 minutes wrap up at the end, too. So the main speaker for tonight is Walter Boyle, and that'll be followed by William Jackson.
Hi, good evening. My name is Walter Boyle. I've been a resident of Thousand Oaks for over 30 years. I've lived on Sirius Street for about 14 years. I am the person who initiated the drive to have the traffic study completed. 10 years ago, a similar study was conducted, which resulted not in the installation of speed humps, but rather in an increase of signage and road striping. In comparing the two studies, the number of vehicles per day has been reduced, but as we spoke earlier, this is a direct result of the closure of University Elementary. In fact, the city delayed this recent study until the school was closed. As you're aware, the city has guidelines for the installation of speed humps. In the 1997 study, the percentage of vehicles traveling over 25 miles an hour did not exceed the city's minimum threshold. In the recent study, using the newly adopted criteria, which were in place at the time of the study, the minimum percentage of vehicles traveling over 25 miles an hour does meet the criteria. And I would cite that from page 4 of the report, where it states the speed criteria would be satisfied since 76% exceed a speed of 25 miles per hour compared to a minimum required threshold of 75% exceeding 25 miles per hour. The percentage of residents who signed the petition exceeds the minimum number required. I myself personally went out and got the petition signed. I was able to contact 42 households. There are 64 houses on the street. Like you all, I have a job, I have a wife, I have a kid, I've got a lot of things to do. I was basically told that I needed the 60%. I went out with the intention of getting 60%. Of the 42 houses that I talked to, 39 people signed the petition. Our street is a residential street with no more than 2 traffic lanes as required by the city's criteria. The only criteria I see which was not met per the study is the minimum number of vehicles per day. I would like to note that the 2 counters used in the study were placed towards the middle of the street to accurately capture speeds. This, however, resulted in an undercounting of vehicles going to and from residences outside of those 2 counters. This undercounting most likely would not have raised the number of vehicles per day to the criteria level, but certainly made the overall numbers closer to it. The city has allowed deviation of its guidelines on 9 prior occasions, citing special circumstances to warrant the installation of speed humps. Examples are lack of sidewalks to force pedestrians into the roadway, limited sight distance due to elevation changes and curvatures of the roadway. The number of cars, in the case of Colgate Drive, speed humps were installed even though the minimum number of cars was less than the criteria. The recent study on Sirius indicates the number of cars per day exceeds even that number. The study also shows that the speeds on our street are what's called typical of a residential street. That may be so, but our street is far from typical. Our street has a 700-foot segment, which has no sidewalks and is only 28 feet wide. The same segment, this is a segment which forces pedestrians into the roadway. The same segment also has multiple blind curves. These curves, along with a steep elevation change and thick vegetation growth typical of an older neighborhood, drastically limit sight distances to lower than the stopping distance of vehicles traveling at speeds deemed typical. I hope you've all had a chance to go out and either walk on our street or at least drive down it. I know Mr. Mashiko showed some pictures here that I think depict a little bit better than the drawing of Exhibit A or C. If you haven't been able to look at that street, I think you have those exhibits in front of you. And if you could take a look at them real quickly, I would say that due to the scale and size of the document, it doesn't accurately reflect the severity of the curvatures of the road, specifically west of Arturas past Sirius Court. The exhibit reflects a gradual curvature of the road rather than the tightly radiused S-curves that exist. Although I will say that those photographs showed a little bit more detail of those curvatures. One issue that is regularly brought up is that diverting traffic onto adjacent streets. Drivers who use our street as a shortcut to avoid stop signs and heavy police enforcement that is conducted on Arbalese and somewhat on Keats may in fact opt to use those streets rather than be slowed by speed humps on our street. If this is the case, those streets would see a minimal increase in traffic on streets which is more suited for that type of traffic. The issue of emergency vehicle response should also be addressed. I'm not an expert in the response of the fire department vehicles. I do know that the larger fire trucks especially are slowed somewhat by speed humps. In our case, however, Fire Station 34 is a mere 1/4 of a mile, 2 blocks from our street. Even with a slight increased response time, we will still have faster response times than residences at greater distances. In reality, our street has such drastic curvature in certain segments, those trucks are already forced to proceed at limited speeds while responding. I do, however, consider myself an expert in responding to calls in police vehicles. I've been a police officer for over 8 years. My department is equipped with the same police interceptor vehicles as the Thousand Oaks Police Department. I have responded to emergency calls numerous times in neighborhoods with speed humps and have never been hampered or hindered in any way. It's not comfortable driving over speed humps at high speeds. However, I'm not, nor do I think any officers in the Thousand Oaks Police Department worry about my comfort when responding to an emergency life-threatening call. To conclude, the report lists possible alternatives to speed humps. Alternatives were tried in the past and have done little to address the problem. Anyone who would drive through a neighborhood past pedestrians at the speeds we see on our street will not slow down for another sign, a line in the road, a speed trailer, or an occasional police enforcement. Simply put, speed humps have been proven to work to force drivers to slow to reasonable speeds or to avoid them utilizing alternative routes on major roads. I implore you to recommend to the City Council that the conditions on our street warrant speed humps. If you experienced on a daily basis people passing you by at 40 or sometimes 50 miles per hour, you would want speed humps on your own street. You have the power to positively affect the quality of life in our neighborhood. Please give us the peace we've been seeking for over 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Questions? No? All right, Mr. William Jackson, followed by Sherrill Boyd. Sorry.
Good evening. My name is William Jaggs, and I live on Sirius Street in Thousand Oaks. A few points that might make interest to you is since the study was done, there's been at least 10 houses that have sold on that block, or on that street. At least 10 houses. Those people, some of them I know, next door neighbor across the street, they were constant complainers about this type of thing. And some of them had good reason to be, because they had real small children. But the street itself, the 700-foot section that you were talking about, I think is owned by the county. That's the reason it's never been curbed or sidewalked. I don't know whether you knew that or not. That's what I was told many times about it. It's not?
Folks, this is a public meeting. Anything that is said has to be said through that
Accept
microphone.
my apology. I didn't know that it had been sold to the city.
Sorry.
Since the little school, the elementary school, closed, traffic has dropped dramatically. The thing that I've noticed is that there are some people who seem to make it their priority to make other people miserable. Speed bumps are revenue negative. They will, number one, they'll hurt the value of the homes on that street. Who wants to live on a street with speed bumps? Number two, if enforcement was increased on the street, it would stop it pretty quick. Number three, if you at least installed a stop sign somewhere on the street in that section that you were talking about, because of the fact that you've got blind quarters, you've got tall bushes, you've got, blind entrances and exits to driveways, that would slow them down a lot. The biggest problem is the stop sign on our bolus. These people that are coming down that street, they're not the people that are living on the street that are causing the problem, yet we're going to be the ones that are going to suffer for this. So, what I would suggest is that another survey be done of the homeowners. I was not personally interviewed to say yay or nay on speed bumps, and I know of several people in here right now that also weren't interviewed. So, I question the survey, and I would request that another survey be done because there are new people living in these homes. They might not have a problem with it. And they don't have small children either. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Boyd? Followed by Leonard Aaron.
My name is Cheryl Boyd, and I live in Thousand Oaks. In fact, I've lived on Sierra Street for 36 years. It's always been this way. I was aware when I bought the house that this was a main street feeding other streets, and it was a shortcut. And I would think people that are buying now would have realized it. Nothing new there. Please go by the city recommendation and do not put speed bumps. I don't care if the fire department is very close. When I call, I don't want them delayed by 1 second. It's important to me. Also, there's less traffic now because of the school being closed. I've seen a change in the 36 years over the properties from various reasons, from the economy to the water rationing to now the closing of the school. What are speed bumps going to do? Golly, I'd hate to have to sell my house if I had a speed bump in front of it. Think of that, would you please? I'd like to have someone take a petition and maybe let's get some sidewalks in that little curve without the 700 feet, I believe, at least on one side. That's always been something most people wanted. Or maybe the city to do the overlay there that seems to be forgotten. It's certainly neglected. I don't even think there's a street light in that corner. Maybe the stop sign there would help, I don't know. But most of the traffic is our own neighbors. They're using our street to go to the little streets that come into it. Our biggest speeders are our neighbors. I know of one that lives right on Cirrus. Maybe the neighbors need to talk to them. But speed bumps are not the answer. Please don't have us, as this gentleman said, to suffer because of the few. I'd like to see the owners surveyed of the houses. We also have rentals now. And I see that our letter went just to occupants, not just homeowners, and I think they should have more of a say. But this is, just go by the recommendation of the city, please. It's been this way for over 36 years. I've lived there 36 years. It really hasn't changed all that much. So think about it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. All right, Mr. Leonard Aaron, followed by Gary Raymond.
Good evening. My name's Leonard Aaron, A-R-O-N. I've been a resident of the city of Thousand Oaks for, I don't know, since about 1995, and before that for a few years. I live over on 107 Venus Street. That's on the corner of Sirius and Venus. And this street hasn't changed since it was originally designed. If anything, the number of children on the street have decreased. I mean, Halloween was a disaster. I had to eat all that candy myself. It was no fun. So the number of children are going down dramatically. If you want to spend $20,000, put in those sidewalks over there in that curve. I mean, it's an unrealistic situation. You have sidewalks leading up to it, sidewalks a few feet away from it, and no sidewalk in between. As far as traffic, it's a narrow little street. People don't go that fast on it, quite frankly. I travel it probably at least 2 times a day. It's natural. It's a natural shortcut. It must have been designed as a natural shortcut because of that stop sign up on Montclair. And if you look at it, that stop sign changes a lot of things. And I'd like to draw your attention, if you were proceeding west on Sirius, as you come to the end of this where it's marked, i.e. at Keats, there's a neighborhood, there's a whole bunch of houses further over on that map. And those people are all serviced when they come from the freeway. They're serviced by Sirius, and they always have been. So what has changed here is very little. What happens is someone moves in and decides he's going to change things. He always thinks it's for the better. Well, he may perceive it that way, but there are certainly plenty of us who bought our places in this neighborhood who know what it is, and it's not a problem. Now, I know you have speed bumps, for example, over on Triumphal in the Thousand Oaks part of Westlake Village, and they had to put those in over there because that's a nice, big, wide street, and people were really flying on it. But people aren't flying like that on the street. It doesn't make sense. And nothing's really changed for the worse here in all this time. And I see no reason to have a speed bump in front of my house. I want that truck coming down and going over a speed bump and dropping its load. I mean, this is madness. No one's going to put a policeman out there because they can't make enough money because the guy's too busy up on Arbalese up near the freeway where he's making real money. So it's just not that bad. People are going to have to learn to live with it. I'm done. Anyone have any questions? Ask me now or forever let me go.
Mr. Aaron, I have one question. You mentioned in your remarks there that this is a shortcut. What is it a shortcut to?
Well, it's not really a shortcut. It's a natural flow of traffic because no one wants to go through that stop sign up at Montclair. No one wants to go through it because it's murder. I think. I haven't been through it so many times that I wouldn't begin to know. And I'm on a motorcycle. If I have to, I cut through it. The point is you have to go through that stop sign if you're coming from, for example, Trader Joe's, and you want to get down into one of these neighborhoods, or in particular, if you want to go to Lynn Road, and you're going south on Lynn Road, and you want to avoid that stop sign. This street was designed for that. They knew it was going to have this certain amount of traffic from it. So here it is. Now we have it. We live with it. I don't think it's that bad. What can you do? They make cars better today than they made them before. I don't own one of those new cars, but they make them, and the people who drive them, they drive them more aggressively than they ever did before. I probably still drive more aggressively, but the fact is, people tend to go a little faster today than they used to because they have better brakes on their vehicles. They don't pay any more attention to the road, but they have better brakes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Mr. Aaron. Mr. Gary Raymond. And that'll be followed up by Mr. Boyle with a 5-minute rebuttal.
Good evening, Gary Raymond. I've lived on Sirius on this street for 28 years. I have several points. Try and go through them quickly. I'd like to refute first a couple of the points Walter Boyle made. a lot of the speeding traffic on that street, as Leonard just mentioned, is through traffic. It is a shortcut. People that are coming from Arbalest will use it to cut through to get down to Flores or any of the streets down in that section. It's slower if they stay on Arbalest, have to stop at the stop sign at Montclair, and then turn left on Keats. It is a shortcut. It is faster, even if you obey the speed limit at 25 miles per hour. So it is. So a lot of people speeding are not the residents living there. Secondly, the S-curve, this was another allegation by Walter Boyle, the S-curve does slow traffic down. The fact that the road is narrowed is actually a benefit in that people do have to slow down. I would recommend that we, in addition to the signage that was added, which I think was beneficial, is that a couple more 25 mile per hour speed limit signs be added. The one that's at the beginning of Sirius, just coming off of Keats, most people miss that. The reason being, I think it's within only a couple houses of the intersection, and usually people are turning at that point. They're paying attention to the street conditions, and they're not looking up at the street to see the sign. I mean, I know this just from experience. I would recommend that we put another 25 mile an hour sign somewhere between Keats and the beginning. This is heading eastbound, and before that S-curve section, wherever the traffic experts feel would be, but somewhere in the middle of that street section there, where once you're going straight down the street, your eyes are looking straight ahead, and you have the ability to really see that 25 mile an hour sign. The S-curve sign that's the beginning of the S-curve section is fine, but it doesn't remind people what the actual speed limit is. So that would be my suggestion. And I would do it also heading the other direction near Sirius Circle. Again, heading into that, have another 25 mile an hour sign there, because I believe the only two signs are when you first enter Sirius, once off Arbalest, once off of Keats. So that would be a suggestion. I think it's a cheap suggestion. Another thing, before the street was repaved, and they did a beautiful job, by the way, but before they repaved it, we had actually a more prominent dotted line that ran through that S section. They did repaint it, but it's not as prominent as it used to be. And I think that would help also, because when people are coming from a 50-foot wide section of the street into a 28-foot wide section, they don't know, especially if they don't live on the street. And so having a very bright yellow dotted line that I think starts earlier and ends later, or is more extended, which I think is the way it used to be, would also help think of people a visual cue. They're coming into a restricted S-curve. They need to slow down, and people do slow down there. I agree with the other residents here that option 2 and option 3 I support. Police enforcement, I'm very strongly opposed to speed humps. I believe they're going to detrimentally affect the property values. They're going to affect people's vehicles. I think there's maybe an issue about liability to the city of vehicle damage from people's vehicles being damaged, even traveling at 25 miles per hour. I don't think the entire neighborhood should be penalized because of people who are breaking the law. I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think that if people are breaking the law, which obviously some are, they should be penalized and written with a ticket. I also agree the radar speed display panel, I think, is a great thing. That does seem to, I know when we've had them on the street, it does seem people do tend to slow down. So I support option 2 and option 3. I'd like to make a couple of real quick comments. I would support, I don't know what the cost would be, and that's another issue, but I would support if it was deemed favorable by the street residents to add sidewalks in that section. We walked up that tonight. You do have to be very careful. I could go either way with it, but adding sidewalks would eliminate some of the safety concerns for that S-curve section. Let me go through, let's see. Also, I have noticed a decreased amount of traffic since University School closed. There's no question about that. A lot of the traffic that we had were moms or dads or whoever, driving their kids to and from school and rushing around at those hours. And I think it was in the report, the recommendation would be to have a police officer during those time periods. Oh, we're out of time. Okay. One last thing really quick is, if necessary, we could add a stop sign at Sirius Circle. I'm not really for it, but that would be much better So anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We do, you know what, Mr. Raymond? There is one question from Commissioner McMahon.
Sure.
In your when you look at the speeds that were recorded, north of Atlas was just slightly faster than south of Atlas.
Yes.
In your perception, is the speed at the S-curve more or less than the other segments of the road?
Well, what I would say in answer to that is that what happens is people who are going eastbound are going uphill, but they have a long run starting at Keats. I mean, I live right about halfway between the S-curve and Keats. So they start zipping down the street, like, again, they tend to miss the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. And again, this is through traffic. I don't think it's mostly the people who live on the street because they know. So they get going pretty fast to get up that hill and through the S-curve. People going the other direction are moving downhill. It's not shown on the map, of course, but there's a significant grade drop. And so what happens is, even if you start at 25, entering Sirius from Arbalest, it's very easy to pick up speed and be hitting 35, and I think that's what a lot of people do if you don't use your brakes or make a conscious effort to slow down. So when you get to the S-curve, you basically have to slow down no matter which way you're going, but they definitely are speeding because you've got a acceleration because of the drop in grade. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
That's good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond. All right, Mr. Boyle, you have another 5 minutes. And if you wouldn't mind, again, restating your name and city of residence for the television audience.
All right, once again, my name is Walter Boyle, and I live on Sirius Street. It's kind of interesting because everyone here seems to agree, except maybe for one person, that the speeds on our street are too high. I didn't have anyone come up here and say people are driving 25 miles an hour, there's not a speed problem. Although I think one person indicated it wasn't too much of a problem. I just quickly looked at one of the data sheets Mr. Mashiko gave me. It's just one day from one segment, and I don't think there's anyone in here who would disagree that going over 35 miles an hour in a residential street is unsafe, just inherently. Forget all the rules and regulations. It's just dangerous to be driving that fast through a residential street with parked cars, people backing out, especially in our street where you've got the blind corners and then no sidewalks. On this one particular, and I'm not going to extrapolate this out to all the time, but of all the drivers in this one segment on this one day, 44% of the vehicles went over 35 miles an hour, including vehicles that were going over 45 and 1, 2, 3 that were over 50 miles an hour. Okay, so I think we can kind of debunk the fact that people aren't driving too fast down the street. Everyone here has offered suggestions. They're all great and wonderful. The signage, the traffic enforcement, the speed trailers, it's been done. It doesn't work. You can put signs up, and what people will do is they will see those signs the first couple of days and notice it because you'll have the big orange flags on them. And after a while, those flags start getting tattered and they get faded, and finally some city worker comes and takes them away. And that sign becomes just like every tree and parked car and kid on the street. It just goes right past. People don't see them. So signage is not going to work. The sidewalks is an intriguing issue. If you install the sidewalks, the pedestrians will feel safer. You'll feel safer walking on the sidewalk rather than walking in the street. If you were to go out to that street and look at how narrow it is, you'd probably have to take some property from people to put those sidewalks in. And that's going to be a major issue, trying to get property. Eminent domain, I guess, is easier these days, but I don't think the city wants to go that route. What it's also going to do is when you put sidewalks in, you're also going to put your gutters and your curbs in. And what that's going to do is that's going to give the drivers themselves more of a safety net. They're going to feel safer because those distinct guidelines are there that they can see. Whereas now you've got the rolled asphalt that goes up and you've got bushes kind of fluffing out into it, and it softens the area up. When they see those distinct curbs, they're going to feel more comfortable going through those corners and hitting those apexes. It's been mentioned here that this has been going on for, I've lived in the city for 30 years. I've only lived in the street, I guess, only compared to these people for 14 years. It seems these problems have been going on for 30 years. Just because things have been going bad for 30 years doesn't mean we should just continue to allow it to go on in the future. As far as the shortcuts, I think maybe one of the speakers misunderstood me. I never said this wasn't a shortcut street. It is definitely a shortcut street. People use our street, like these people have stated, to bypass stop signs. They'll bypass the stop sign on Arborlease. They'll bypass heavy traffic enforcement that's done up on Arborlease, both 22-350s and 22-450s. In addition, people will actually come northbound on Keats, and instead of going to Arborlease and turning eastbound, that stop sign there is extremely dangerous for drivers, because coming from coming eastbound on Arborlease, it's a blind corner, and myself, I avoid that. If you try and make a right turn, you can pull out, and if there's a car coming at 50 miles an hour, they are right on top of you instantly. And so I don't blame people for coming up the street sometimes to avoid that dangerous situation. But what that does is that dangerous situation flows over into my neighborhood with my wife, and yes, I do have kids that I want to protect, and will do anything I can to protect. And that's one of the reasons, if not the reason, that I'm here. So our street is definitely a shortcut street. People use it to shortcut down in the neighborhood below us. People shortcut it in order to get up to Moore Park and Arborlease, to go to the gas stations and the Trader Joe's and such. If you really want to do some traffic enforcement, do it on Sunday and do it at halftime during the football games, because that's when people are making the beer runs up to the liquor store. You know, I'm not trying to make light of it, but that's basically the situation, is that people are using our street in order to shortcut, to make their lives easier, and quite frankly, making my life more dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Any questions of Mr. Boyle? Actually, I should ask that first. No? Okay. Sir, you'd have to fill out a comment card, or you bet. Sir, I cannot engage you when you're sitting in the audience, sir. Ms. Bravo, I suppose, for a brief moment.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Gary Raymond again, Thousand Oaks. A couple points. Mr. Boyle said that it's not safe having 35-mile-an-hour speeds in residential sections. Well, most of the streets along the area, like Flores and Arborlease, are 35 miles an hour. They are residential. The fact we have 25, I think, is appropriate, but the point is that that there are residential sections that do have 35 miles an hour. A stop sign, even though I'm not really for it, but it's certainly much better than a hump, because a stop sign will absolutely force people to stop, even if they roll through it. That will kill the momentum on Sirius. It'll be right in the middle of that entire 6/10 of a mile run. Either going eastbound or westbound, it'll slow people down. It'll force them to keep with much slower speeds. The other thing I was going to say about this petition, I went and talked to neighbors about this event tonight. A lot of neighbors, if you ask them casually, do they want to reduce the speeds, everybody agrees. And you say, do you want to reduce the speeds? You have 4 speed humps. Say, well, yes, no, whatever. They were pretty blasé about it. I think a lot of people are for reducing speeds. I don't think that 60% or whoever supposedly of the residents were for speed humps specifically. I think they were were not aware that there are other options. And I definitely support officers writing tickets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready? This will close the public portion of the meeting. And are there any questions of staff? And anybody have any questions of staff? I do. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner McCain.
I was just curious about that section of road. I mean, I recognize that it is property, looks like it's, property that the city doesn't own, and so the street narrows, but is there a reason why it's just so unimproved compared to the rest of the street?
Yeah, well, we were looking for records to try to find that explanation, and it appears that it was a segment when it was incorporated into the city from the county. So when it was incorporated or accepted, it was not improved at the time. And I know that segment is on our capital improvements priority list. I'm not sure exactly when the timing of those improvements would take place, but that's something I can bring back at the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly like to know what the timing and what the planned improvements are, because I think it makes a big difference. That area is, to me, looks really scary. I wouldn't want to live there.
Commissioner Lemo.
My question now is in regards to that. The planned improvement is part of the planned improvement going to require the city acquiring land to be able to put sidewalks on there and widen the road, or is it to simply resurface the road? Do you have any idea what any of the specifics are in that capital improvement plan? I'll bet not.
No, I don't think that plan or the project has progressed far enough along so that we would know those answers today. But I would probably want to point out that if you put in sidewalks in that segment, we would probably maintain that current road width the way it is, and probably put the sidewalk and curb and gutter and things like that roughly where there's landscaping and things like that. So the property owners would have to move what's there now if it's encroaching in the public right-of-way. And
yeah, is there a way to put that picture back up? Commissioner McMahon?
Is that side of the road public right-of-way, or is it owned by the property owners? I mean, we were one of the speakers was talking about having to go through eminent domain, but the city owns part of that, right?
yeah, well, typically from road segments like this I've seen before, usually things like the landscaping that's in that just behind the pavement, that's probably within the city right away. There's probably about somewhere between 8 to 10 feet that behind the paved segment that's within the right of way. And I would like to point out that if you were to put in sidewalks here, that probably would have really no influence over speeds. If anything, it may encourage more speeding through this area, because what you're doing is physically separating the pedestrians from the vehicular traffic. So when motorists go through that area, they're going to realize that pedestrians are something that they won't have to deal with anymore.
Commissioner Gregory is next, and then you can have another bite at the apple there.
I know we've heard this answered before, but if you were to just put speed humps in that central section, what would be your recommendation? I mean, considering breaking up, I mean, there's like, what is it, 10 in there right now? Or what else could you recommend, let me ask, to calm traffic in that curved section? I heard a recommendation of better striping, and I did see some striping today when I drove the area. It seemed kind of broken up.
You know, I think one of the speakers probably brought it out as far as the way the road is curved through that segment and the way it narrows. It's probably calming the traffic today, because when we took our measurements, we took them outside that curved section in the straight portions, so speeds are probably the greatest, you know, outside the curved section. So what's probably happening is people are going through, entering from either end, they encounter a straight segment of road, and then eventually they come across the narrowed curved section of road. They're going to slow down, and once they exit the curved section, they're going to try to make up for lost time, which is the same concept where someone brought the suggestion, what if we put a stop sign somewhere in that curved section? Well, you're probably going to have the same type of situation, is because stop signs aren't designed to slow traffic. People are going to lose, you know, further time, and so they're going to want to make it up again. So maybe, you know, you might have speeds increase if you do anything more to try to, you know, calm traffic through that section. So in general, our recommendation is when we put in speed humps, you want to put speed humps throughout the entire stretch of road that you're putting in speed humps, not just an isolated segment, because you're going to have slow speeds in the isolated segment, but increased speeds beyond the calming zone.
Okay. And that's the answer I've gotten before. Thank you.
Commissioner McKay?
So just to clarify, you think that having this kind of natural traffic choking is effectively slowing people down? And I guess I wasn't thinking of slowing people down, I was thinking of pedestrians when I was saying, not that I didn't want to live there, but it would scare me to walk down Sirius and go through that section, and so it was pedestrian safety that I was concerned with there. But I do see that it is a natural choking point to slow traffic down.
Yes, I just want to point out that some of the traffic calming devices that are used other than speed humps by other cities, one of them are called choke points, which are road narrowings, and that's exactly what we have here, is a narrowing of the roadway and also road curvature. So in effect, there is sort of a traffic calming situation pre-existing out there today.
Mr. Machiko, do you know what addresses are involved in that 700-foot segment? And I realize it's a bit of an unfair question, but...
Okay, we have a, I gave you before...
That narrow section there.
A map that shows a layout, if you want to look at the map.
Are you talking about the one with the highlighted?
With the highlighted
yes.
homes who signed
yes,
the petition.
I am.
I think you're probably looking at the segment that begins at Arcturus, south of Arcturus, and I would imagine the last home on there, I could...
Might it be somewhere around 2469, that address there, where the curvature ends? Sound about right?
Yeah, maybe 2590. I'm looking at an aerial photo that I brought, and it's probably about 2490 or 2614.
Okay, that's where it begins and ends?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Mr. Lemo?
Thank you, Chair Price. I'd like to make a motion, and I'll explain in just a second why. I would like to move that we follow staff's recommendation. I would like to request that move that we deal with option 2 and option 3, both, because I do believe that use of the radar speed display, at least the proof that we've seen over the months, is that the use of the radar speed display works. I think there's a lot of factors to look at here, but the one that I think strikes me the most is not the fact that it doesn't meet the criteria in any of the current categories, and that there have been 4 collisions, only 1 related to speed since 2005. That, I think, is the one that probably hits me hard, and we just don't have any level of precedent from our own rule-making ability, or the city's rule-making ability, and we also don't have any occurrence that is leading us to say that there has been a change, a drastic change. And so for that reason, I think staff's recommendation is right. I want to thank staff for a very thorough report. The other thing that I think hits me real hard is one of the speakers said tonight, and I've seen this happen in my own neighborhood, is that a neighbor comes to your door and says, do you want to reduce speed? I got to tell you, except for when I was 16 years old, I probably would have answered that question yes every time. But I also think that it's very representative to me that we've got 5 speakers tonight, 4 of which support doing something, but not doing something as drastic, perhaps, as a speed bump. And I know that when this gets to a city council level, they're going to have an expectation of backing up their reason for breaking precedent. And I just don't think the evidence exists. And so for that reason, I'm moving staff option 2 and option 3. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner McMahon.
Thank you. Would you consider adding to your motion to repaint the stripes in a more flamboyant manner so that they're more noticeable. I thought that was a very good suggestion, maybe a little brighter, easier to see from a longer distance away.
Well, pretty much 99% of what you said, I agree with. I'm not sure I know what flamboyant manner means, but if you could find something in a lime green or a chartreuse, sure, I would include that in my motion.
Thank you.
Any other comments on that motion? Commissioner Gregory.
Yeah. One of the things we do here when things are outside of the warrants is, we look for exceptions that have some kind of meaning, okay? So we don't set precedents that anybody can just ask for speed humps. They don't have to meet the warrants. There are a lot of legal ramifications. We see these all the time, that if we do things wrong, we put the city in jeopardy to be sued, okay, because things are too far askew. The volume on this road, I'm just afraid, is so far off. If the school was still in session, you might even be able to make some better arguments, but with it gone and with the traffic decreased, I'm afraid, that one factor is so far from the warrants that I don't think if you took this thing any further, it would ever get approved. So, I'm supporting the motion as it is.
Commissioner McMahon.
I would like to know, we don't need to put it in the motion, but the comment about the signs maybe not being in the right place to be noticed by the drivers as they're turning, is that something that the city could just look at unofficially and see if they need to be moved back a little bit? So that, because it's true, when you're making a turn, you're not looking for a sign, and so if repositioning them makes sense, we can do that without adding it to the motion, right?
I would just want to say that obviously the safety and security of anybody's children and the residents on that street has to be the paramount importance. And I think everybody is concerned about the speed on those streets, or on that particular street. I do know, and it's been spoken about by several of the speakers here tonight, that the increased enforcement out on Arbalest has caused people to move to other streets where perhaps they might not get a ticket. It might be time to move that enforcement down onto Sirius and perhaps address it that way. And I think it probably is. I've driven the street. I drove it as recently as this afternoon or this evening. And I certainly hear what you're saying, that there are, and the numbers show that 76% of the people are exceeding the speed limit there by at least 10 miles an hour. But I also think that it is, in fact, the people who live in that neighborhood there that are probably the major violators. And I think that if we move some traffic enforcement down there, that and it's not going to happen overnight. It's a public education campaign, and once done, I think that people will recognize that they may choose that stop sign up at Mount Clef as opposed to going through Sirius because they're less apt to run into a motor officer. So I would be in support of the motion as it's constituted as well. Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner McKay.
My only comment is, we do look at special considerations, and although the university is no longer an elementary school, it is being developed into a child care center for even younger children than are currently there, as well as there could be some special education moved on to that site. As it stands today, I would be in support of the motion. I do with Commissioner McMahon's striping. I like the idea of choking that even a little more by putting some striping through that section that is unimproved. But I just, maybe just to look at in the future, if that does become a large child care center as the school district would like it to become, and traffic again becomes a larger issue, maybe we can revisit it at that time, but right now, it's not there, and so I would support the motion.
And again, I would certainly agree with that, that if the situation changes, then obviously this is something that would need to be looked at again. But I also think it's important to echo some of Commissioner Gregory's comments that the installation of traffic calming measures or speed humps, signs, signals, all of that has to be looked at, and one needs to ensure that they're adhering to the warrants that are set forth by the state. And in this case here, not only does it not meet the warrants of the policies here of the city, but it comes short of those for the state of California too. So again, I'm going to support the motion. If there are no other comments, Ms. Bravo, if you call for the vote.
I think we can do a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Technology. And we are on to item number 7, status report on prior Traffic Commission recommendations. And there are none. And moving to number 8, Commission referrals from October 21st, 2009. And I know there were a couple of things that, Mr. Michiko, would you like to address those couple of items there?
Okay, yeah, there's just 2 items in this follow-up from the last meeting as far as, I think the question was asked about the collisions at the intersection of the Newberry Road and Newberry Road Collector. And when that road, the Newberry Road Collector first opened, there were a series of collisions over at the, that would be the southwest corner, because of the way the curvature of that segment it was. And what happened is people, as they were making their left turn, as you're traveling westbound, entering the Newberry Road from the connector, they struck the curb. And so what happened is the city went and placed some delineators, some markers to better mark that corner so that people would notice where the curb was. And so since that improvement was made, there have been no collisions or no incidents where vehicles are striking that curb any longer. And we've also made some modifications with respect to the striping for northbound traffic. I think before we used to have 2 lanes for northbound traffic. What we did was we moved and shifted the traffic further to the east, so that when that same left turn traffic from the connector, when they make their left turn, they're brought more to the east, so that they're less prone to hit that curb. So if you've been out there, you'll see that there's been some changes in the last year. The second item is the question regarding the oversized vehicle ordinance that's going to go into effect next year, as far as what the fine would be. And it's a $100 fine, and it's going to be $100 fine for each incident. I don't believe there was an increasing fee structure for that. And we are going to make sure that the oversized ordinance is publicized before it's implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Michiko. Commissioner McKay?
You said that there was an increase in the fee. Isn't that $100 more than it used to be for a violation? I thought it was like $45 before. Or was it always $100?
Oh, no, yes. For this one, it was specifically set $100. A typical parking fine, I believe, is about $40.
Okay, so it's $100. So it was an increase. It's just they're not increasing it incrementally for each violation. Okay, thank you.
Very good. There was one important admonition that I neglected to read, and I do want to read it here, and I wish that the speakers hadn't left, but I'm going to read it. The Traffic Commission makes recommendations to the City Council, and interested parties may attend the meeting and speak either for or against the recommendation of the Traffic Commission. Any person wishing to appeal a decision of the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission shall file a written appeal and pay an appeal fee with the City Clerk's office within 14 calendar days of this decision. The matter will be referred to the City Council at the earliest reasonable and available date. The appeal fee will be refunded only if the City Council overturns the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission's decision. And an appeal form is available tonight. Please see Ms. Bravo. And in light of the fact that I neglected to read that while the main speaker, Mr. Boyd, was still here, I would ask staff to send him that verbiage in some manner along with that appeal fee or that appeal form. Thank you. All right, item number 9, the work program and commission schedule. Looks like we have the... Yeah, in light of... well, I know that we have put this off once before, the North Park Scenic Park one-year evaluation. Did we not put that off once before, Mr. Machiko, and elect to discuss it in January?
Yes, I think what we're doing is we're just monitoring the location, and we took some shortcut surveys, a license plate survey, shortly after the school year began, and we may repeat that and then present the data at the next time, back in January when we talk about the issue.
I guess my question was going to be, because of Commissioner McKay's comment, are we going to have anything to do in January? But I think that we have to meet anyway in January for a reorganization meeting, so I guess that is a moot point. We're going to be here whether or not there's anything on the agenda, although it does appear that this is ready to be discussed in January. Okay, very good. Then item number 10. I'm sorry. Oh, Traffic Commission comments or discussion. Yes, Commissioner McKay.
I attended a city council meeting 2 weeks ago, and it was the priority of lights for intersections, and there was a motion, I guess, that died because it was 2-2 about raising Lynn and Lotus, turning Lynn and Lotus into a controlled intersection with lights, trying to get it to the top of the list as a priority. And I was concerned as a citizen and as a traffic commissioner. I don't know, is that going to come back to us? It seemed odd that it was going to jump to the top of the list, and again, because it went without any conclusion at all, I didn't know if the neighborhood would have an opportunity to come back and talk to us. The one thing that was not brought up that night, and I have gone around and looked at it and spoken to a couple of the residents about, kind of how that whole situation came about, and I guess the developer of Lynn Ranch North, originally, they put the light in at Jans and Lynn, and then when Lynbrook and Lynmere were developed, that green belt was put in and the road through to Jans was taken out. And I didn't know, in all the considerations of making Lynn and Lotus safer, has traffic considered putting that throughway road back in so that those residents could exit safely from their neighborhood using an intersection that's already controlled at Jans. And I've walked it. I've walked across the grass. I've gone to, I think it's Ferndale is the road that would go through to Jans Road. Presumably it wouldn't be as expensive as, and I don't know, this is a big assumption on my part, but because the road used to be there, it wouldn't require as much development to put the road back. They just planted, put some dirt and grass over it and turned it into an emergency, it's got that decomposed granite. It's an emergency road now. But it just seems to me that might be a more sensible look at how to exit those people, those 250 people in that neighborhood that right now try to dash a left out from Lotus onto Lynn and claim it's very dangerous and that they have no safe way out of their neighborhood. If traffic, if anybody had considered that in Public Works as an option, and I didn't know what other forum it could be brought up in. I didn't bring it up that night, although I did speak. So anyway, that was just something I thought if you could, as staff, take that back to Public Works, because I know that's just laying out there because council didn't make a decision that night, and they were deadlocked. So that's my comment.
Any other comments?
Yeah, any
All
other,
right.
I want to redo the city.
Commissioner Lello.
Thank you, Chair Price. I have a question, and I don't know what the expense involved is, but one of the most frustrating things you hear up here quite often is when someone comes in for a speed bump or somebody comes in for a stop sign, the people who are most guilty, I guess, of violating the speed rules and all happen to be residents of that community. I'm wondering what the expense is, and if it's even possible to, when a decision gets made, not here, but at City Council, that the people who you've given the addresses to us on this street, those affected, would all receive a mail notice of, this is what took place at Council, this is what we're going to do, so that you're aware that there's going to be, increased police officers in your neighborhood or whatever, and hope that in some way, shape, or form, that's some level of a deterrent. I don't know if the expense outweighs the benefit, but is that something that can easily be done, or would that take a lot of staff time?
Well, typically, like for example, a meeting like tonight or a council where we go through a notification process, or like this meeting we had 117 notices sent out to invite the public. Typically after the meeting, we really don't do another follow-up mailing. Perhaps at a future meeting, you can add that maybe as part of your recommendation to have staff send out or submit, re-notify the mailing zone of the recommended outcome.
Well, and I would even like to go one step further and save a little money and say that we would re-notify them after council has made a determination, so that we're not mailing anything in this interim period. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bravo. And that brings us to item number 11, the engineer's status reports. We have them in your packet there. The monthly status of the Bicycle Advisory Team, October 22nd. I think actually our very first public speaker spoke on these items here. And then the monthly status of the school safety team. It looks like they went out on October 28th to Weathersfield Elementary. Commissioner McKay, do you have anything else to report on that?
I think I reported on Weathersfield last month, but we did go out just a couple of days ago to Westlake High School, which, as always, high schools are interesting because they have both adult drivers bringing their children and student drivers driving themselves, and all the interesting things they've learned along the way. We did make a couple of recommendations that will be shifting. Recommended to shift some what we think is unsafe street parking on via Merida and or Meridia, and moving. There is parking down on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, so there's a couple of things that we're going to do. It's just one of those situations where the school is located and how the streets surround it, that it just takes a great deal of patience for people for about a half hour in the morning and a half hour at pickup time, and as the parents get used to it, they get into a groove, and there's always those that double park and block and are a little more inconsiderate than others, or in a bigger hurry than others perhaps. But like many schools, there's just not a whole lot that can be done except to implore upon the parents to be a little more safe and to practice a little more safety with their children and not let them out in the middle of the road when they're double parked, or, as we saw, pick them up from the center median and other things. So it's just my monthly please, parents, drive more safely when you take your children to and from school.
You know, patience is sometimes in short supply in close proximity to schools, it seems, huh? I had also heard that there was a student who was struck over at Westlake High maybe 2 weeks ago. Had you heard that?
Yes, wasn't hurt. So it was a, yeah, I think it might have actually been a student running into a car as opposed to a car running into a student.
That happens on occasion as well. Well, if there's nothing else, then we will adjourn. The next meeting of the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Committee will be held on at 7:30 p.m. on January 20th, 2010 in the boardroom here at the Civic Arts Plaza. Good night.